All right, thank you for taking the time to join us. It's still Global Matters coming live to you from our studios here in Abuja, AIT. I'm now being joined by Ignatius Annor, who is now joining us from the capital in Washington, D.C. Ignatius, thank you for your time on the program today.
Good evening, Tunde. Thank you for having me as well.
Great. Let's start with an update that we have on the Israeli war. We know that President U.S. Biden has been appealing to Congress to approve a package that will include billions of dollars that will support Israel in this war. I don't know if you have an update on that. Just give us a general summary of the position of the United States so far.
All right, Tunde. So yesterday, President Joe Biden spoke to American citizens around 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And one of his major appeals to the country, and in particular to members of Congress, the legislators that are currently, as I'm speaking to you, locked up in the dome over there, trying to elect a speaker so that the business of the House can keep going, made a request. And the request was that he needed $100 billion in funding, not only for the Israeli state to support their efforts at defeating Hamas, which is a Palestinian militant group, but also in supporting Ukraine's efforts in the invasion that happened 2 years ago by the Russian Federation. So yesterday, President Biden indeed said that as far as this conflict, which is the Israeli-Hamas conflict, is concerned, it's really about simply safeguarding democracy and the security of the American people. It is why he has appealed to Congress to provide more money towards that effort. And as I speak, the Republicans have yet to elect a speaker following the ouster of Kevin McCarthy earlier this month when he made sure that the government shutdown did not happen. It was ousted by a handful of Republicans. And that's the reason Jim Jordan, who is the Ohio representative, also a Republican, has been trying to get the nod to lead the House so that votes can happen, so that money that President Biden is asking for can be a reality. As I speak to you, the business of the House has come to a halt, and we are yet to see whether or not Republicans will be able to provide a speaker of the House of Representatives.
Let's start from where you are at the moment, Ignatius. What is the mood there at the Capitol Hill? Of course, the U.S. has got its own problem trying to find a speaker. Jordan has failed about 2 or 3 times now. The U.S. just escaped being shut down in terms of the economy. $100 million is not a joke. What is the mood? Is the Congress going to be favorably disposed to such amount of money? As we are likely to also have congressmen that are going to be sympathetic to the Palestinian cause.
Right. Tina, that's a very good question. So as I speak to you, it is uncertain what lies ahead in the next couple of days. Now, the only way out is for a substantive speaker to be elected. Now, when that speaker is elected, it would then lead to votes happening that would ensure that legislation is passed to make the money available. That cannot be done right now because there's no leader of the House. Essentially, the House of the People has been paralyzed. But that is also not to say that there is no leader. There is an interim leader in the person of Patrick McHenry, but he, of course, is not the substantive leader and so hasn't got the powers that is required to be able to call the vote that would lead to an election, making sure that the money that President Biden is asking for is gotten. And that's why Congress is at where it is right now. 3 elections have been held. 2 elections, I should say, I beg your pardon. A third one is underway. For the second one, Representative Jim Jordan fell short of 18 votes. And of course, some Republicans have been holding up on that, making sure that their grievances and their concerns, are heard before essentially a leader is held. But remember that a few months ago, actually in January, it took 15 votes for Kevin McCarthy to be elected for the House to be up and running. And we're back again where we are in January. As to whether or not it would take that amount of vote as it did in January, we are yet to see that. today.
Yes, thanks a lot, Ignatius. I mean, a couple of people, in fact, there have been a couple of international condemnation against the position of the United States of America, especially President Joe Biden. They said on one hand, he condemned Russia for the killing of children and women in Ukraine, but giving backing and support to Israel for the killing of children and women in Gaza. How is the U.S. managing this contradiction?
Yesterday, in the 15 minutes rare Oval Office address by the president, he spoke about the support of the United States for Israel in this fight. He also said that he had very strong words to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and also had conversations with Egypt's President Abdullah Fattah el-Sisi for the Rafah crossing in Gaza to be opened so that badly needed humanitarian aid could reach civilians in Palestine. In the Gaza Strip, as I speak to you. 2 days ago, on Wednesday, just a few feet away from the U.S. Capitol, two Jewish organizations, Jewish Voices for Peace and If Not Now, held a pro-Palestinian rally where they were calling for a ceasefire and calling on the Biden administration to call on both sides in the Middle East to essentially ceasefire immediately. There were two Congresswomen who addressed that gathering. Representative Cori Bush from the state of Missouri, and also Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib is the very first Palestinian-American serving in the U.S. Congress. She was emotional, criticized the Biden administration for, as she said, turning a blind eye on what's happening, particularly in the Gaza Strip. And also spoke about the fact that on Monday, the 13 Democrats introduced a resolution calling for a ceasefire. And according to Cori Bush, that particular resolution is gaining traction. She said that just a week ago, even the word ceasefire wasn't something the members of Congress were uttering, but it looks as if that is changing. So on one hand, you would also hear support from some members of Congress asking for the U.S. to condemn what's happening on the Palestinian people, and huge support also from the House for Israel. And you know, historically, the United States has a strong partnership with Israel as a state.
Thanks a lot, Ignatius Annor, VOA correspondent, giving us update from Capitol Hill there in Washington, D.C. Ignatius, if I can just ask you to stay for maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Let me go to, still with you in Washington, D.C., let me go to Miko Peled. Miko Peled is an Israeli author who is also at a rally in this Washington, D.C., there, rally against the Palestinian, against the Israeli war in Gaza. Miko, thank you for taking the time to join us. Could you tell us where you are right there? Give us update as to where you are and what is going on there. Miko.
Yes, well, thank you for having me. I'm right in front of the U.S. Capitol, where thousands and thousands of people are assembling to stand with the Palestinian people. And I want to just reframe the issue here. There's no war going on. This is a genocide. This is a massacre. And I want to appeal to my brothers and sisters in Africa. You remember apartheid. You remember settler colonialism. You know what it's like when you are oppressed and murdered in this way. This is savagery, what is happening in Palestine right now. The war is not between Israel and Hamas. The war is between Israel. It's not between. Israel declared war on the Palestinian people. There's a genocide. There's ethnic cleansing. And there's a brutal apartheid regime that has taken over Palestine and is being maintained and supported even by African states over 75 years. And I want to appeal to the African leaders and to the African people to close the missions, the Israeli missions, kick out the diplomats, end all relations with the apartheid state of Israel. Remember your roots. Remember the struggles that Africa had against apartheid, against settler colonialism, against racism. This is a continuation of that.
Miko, you are very not far away from where Ignatius is at the Capitol Hill. You're probably, while Ignatius is right at the Capitol Hill where the congressmen have shot themselves in trying to resolve some of the crises there. You are at the protest ground in Capitol Hill. But my concern, Miko, you are a Jew, you are an Israeli Jew, but it does appear you're taking sides with the Palestinian. How do you manage that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I'm a human being before anything else. I'm a human being before anything else. And when I see apartheid and when I see genocide, I stand up. You know, the fighting apartheid and colonialism in Africa was not only an African issue, it was an issue for people of conscience. Palestine is an issue for people of conscience. The United States vetoed a resolution to end the killing, for a ceasefire. They vetoed. They're allowing Israel to continue to savagely slaughter men, women, and children in the Gaza Strip, which is a prison to begin with. This is a horrifying situation. The international community can no longer stand aside and allow Israel to continue and pretend like this is some kind of a war. It's not a war. It's a genocide. It's been going on for 75 years. The apartheid regime must be dismantled. And I plead again with our African brothers and sisters. I may be Jewish. You may be African. It doesn't matter. It's not about religion. It's not about politics either. It's about humanity. It's about values. Anybody who holds the values of human life, the values of democracy and liberty and justice must support the Palestinian cause without reservation. Israel is a racist apartheid regime that is slaughtering Palestinians, not for the first time, but for many, many years. And it's time to stop that apartheid regime. It's time for the world to stand up and say enough.
Miko, what Israel has said he's got the right to defend itself. And of course he's got the right to defend itself. If Hamas, hang on 1 minute, Hamas has not gone on to attack Israel on his own soil on October 7th, probably we will not be where we are now. Shouldn't we generally also condemn that attack on Israel ground, on Israel soil, that killed almost 1,600 people and 200 people taking no stage into Gaza?
I'm sorry, my friend. I have to reject the premise of what you said. Israel has been murdering people in the Gaza Strip and all over Palestine long before there was Hamas. There was always some reason, some name. Palestinians have never had an army. A small group of guerrilla fighters came in to exact a military operation of resistance. Israel has been murdering and slaughtering Palestinians long before Hamas was here. And the excuse is always that it's the victim's fault. It's always the victim's fault. Of course it's the victim's fault, because why do they exist? Why are they alive? Why are they fighting? Palestinians are fighting for their liberty. Israel is murdering people like savages.
Miko, is Israel not entitled to self-defense? Ability to defend itself against aggressors?
My friend, it's not a question of self-defense. Israel is killing people in Gaza regardless of self-defense. Murdering civilians is not defending any Israeli. Israel has been murdering Palestinian civilians for 75 years. It has not kept Israelis safe. We saw very clearly as a handful of guerrilla fighters from one of the poorest places in the world managed to upstage the entire Israeli army and completely paralyze the state of Israel. It's not about self-defense. It's about murder. It's about revenge.
Miko, you are an Israeli Jew. Miko, you are an Israeli Jew. How would you describe the invasion of the Israeli territory by Hamas, killing 1,600 people?
First of all, we don't know how many were killed, and we don't know who killed them. There's a great deal of testimony showing that many of the Israelis were killed by Israeli forces. So we don't know exactly the fact, how many were killed and by whom. We do know for sure that for years now, Israel has been slaughtering Palestinians by the thousands. Men, women, children. You know, Palestinians have never had an army. They've never had a military force. All Palestinians are civilians except for small groups of guerrilla fighters. Murdering people and murdering civilians like this, flattening the city of Gaza, an ancient city, is going to keep Israelis safe. This is nonsense. The only thing that will keep Israelis safe is dismantling the apartheid state, dismantling the racist laws, dismantling the terrorist regime, which is the state of Israel and its military force, which again we saw is completely incapable even to stand up to a small group of fighters. The lands that belong to the Palestinians in Gaza are outside of the Gaza Strip. Their water, their rights are all on the other side of the fence. The Gaza Strip is a prison, and what we saw was an attempt by prisoners to stand up and say enough is enough.
All right, Miko.
And I'm telling you, we do not know how many were killed, and we don't know.
But we do know people were killed. We do know that people, over 200 people were taken hostage into Gaza.
Yes, that we know. Yes,
and Hamas has taken responsibility for that. We do know that very well.
Of course. Yes, we do know that. Absolutely, absolutely. When you maintain a brutal apartheid state for 75 years, when you murder innocent civilians by the thousands, and I emphasize, savage murder of civilians by the thousands for 75 years, my friend, this is not a joke. So yes, from time to time, the Palestinians, the people who are being oppressed, will stand up and fight back from time to time.
All right,
we know that the vast majority of Palestinian resistance has not been armed. The one time they are armed, this is to be expected.
All right,
the world,
Miko.
and particularly Africa, needs to stand with Palestine.
All right, Miko. May I ask you to just give me 1 minute? Just stay there. Let me go back to my colleague, who is right there, the Capitol Hill VOA correspondent. Ignatius, you saw the passion with which Miko is an Israeli based in the U.S. You saw the passion with which he condemned the Israeli action. This is a semblance of the division in the U.S. as I've just retreated even in the Congress. Could you give us the mood right out there in the U.S.? What is really going on? This is an Israeli now condemning Israeli action. And just as you said, we have this division in the Congress. Give us a general assessment of the mood. It does appear it's not an easy task out there for the U.S. President.
All right, Tunde. So let's put some things into perspective here. You would recall that on Wednesday when President Biden made a visit to Israel, meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, we had Benjamin Netanyahu talked about the fact that Hamas, which is the Palestinian militant group, does not care about the civilians. It's the reason they have been in close contact with their partners in the United States and also folks in Egypt as well to ensure a safe passage of badly needed humanitarian aids like medicine and clothing and essentials for the civilians who have been caught up in the crossfire. Also remember that the Israeli government this week issued some sort of a 24-hour notice for Palestinians living in northern Gaza to vacate to the south as the expected invasion is supposed to happen, we understand, within the next couple of days. Now, on the back of that, President Biden also did say that within the next few days, the Rafah crossing will be open. And we also heard from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, actually in Egypt as we speak, to witness, that crossing to ensure essentials gets to civilians in the Gaza Strip. On the Capitol Hill, well, there are a few things happening. Right now, as I told you, there is no leadership in place. So the concern is, first of all, let's get a leader in place and, let the House run the affairs of the people. President Biden making a passionate appeal for the monies to be released. Also saying that Israel should ensure that civilians in Palestine do not come in harm's way. So on one hand, you're hearing him condemn Hamas for the attack. On the other hand, telling his counterpart in Israel that do everything you can to ensure that civilians in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip, get the protection and the badly needed humanitarian aid they need.
Thank you so much for this wonderful report, update from the Capitol Hill you are giving to us. We'll continue this discussion again. Miko, thanks a lot for the update you are giving to us and for this passionate call for support for the Palestinian people. Miko, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the program. Miko, are you still there, Miko?
Yes, I'm right here.
Thanks a lot. I'm afraid I need to go now. We'll come back to you at some other time to look at what is going on and get a better position from you, a review. Thanks a lot, guys, for taking the time to join us.
Anytime.
Miko from Capitol Hill in the U.S. and Ignatius Annor, VOA correspondent, also join us from the Capitol Hill. Thank you, guys. This is how far we can go. We continue to monitor what is happening in the Gaza Strip as my colleagues continue to give you more updates. My name is Tunde Alabi. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the program. Bye.
Does the police have the right, of...
Make una come make you celebrate you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you celebrate you. Person when work was supposed to chop or make una come make you jubilate you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you jubilate you. You carry my mother for your head, you are there, my side they qualificate you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you celebrate you. Give me 1 minute to make a shamaya. One no one on the make you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you celebrate you. Dio, Dio, Dio. Munachi muso. Dio, Dio, Dio. Kaimwe banguri manem. Dio, Dio, Dio. Awalonya mechi manemo. Dio, Dio, Dio. Munachi muso. You know say money day, every day na holiday. We say unko, everything be like we put them on top. All of them are bless me, gong. Give me money, gong. Shy, we dey sweep my body day. We dey sweep, they feel like all of my touch me. You go feel the anointing, feel me. I say you go come to your blessing, yo. Only me commando, only me Rambo, only me Vandamo. Make una come make you celebrate you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you celebrate you. Person when work was supposed to chop or make una come make you jubilate you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you jubilate you. You carry my mother for your head, you are there, my side they qualificate you. Yeah, make you celebrate you. Make una come make you celebrate you. Give me
Hi, this is A New Nigeria with Wale Oluwade. This is your current affairs program where we critically examine the strategic issues bedeviling Nigeria's developmental aspirations and boldly offer practical suggestions on building the Nigeria of our collective desires. Today's episode promises to be engaging and exciting. In today's edition of the program, we're continuing the presentation I began a few weeks ago where I evaluated the 3 strategic issues I believe Nigeria needs to get right if we're to make that giant leap forward. And these issues are, number 1, jobs creation and poverty eradication. Number 2, how do we manage our crude oil resources for better efficiency and productivity? And number 3, power, availability and sufficiency, which is what we're dealing with today. It has been said by the World Bank and other global bodies, 92 million Nigerians don't have access to grid electricity. This represents 43% of the country's population and makes Nigeria the country with the largest energy access deficit in the world. This lack of reliable power is a significant constraint for citizens and businesses, resulting in annual economic losses estimated at about 26.2 billion US dollars, which, when translated in today's exchange rate, is well over 26 trillion naira, which represent about 2% of our entire GDP. According to the 2020 World Bank Ease of Doing Business report, Nigeria ranks 171 out of 190 countries in getting electricity, and electricity access is seen as one of the major constraints for the real sector, that is manufacturing and industrial sectors. Also, improving access, availability and sufficiency of electricity is strategic to eradicating poverty and unlocking economic growth through the provision of jobs, increasing revenues in non-oil sectors, boosting exports, earning forex, and ensuring peace and stability in the polity. Yet, what are some of the issues that have held this sector down, and what are the solutions to this? These are some of the issues we're examining in this presentation. We'll take this short break, and when I return, we'll get right into the presentation. Stay with us, please. Welcome back. Now, let's get right into the presentation today. The topic of the presentation is strategies for power availability and sufficiency in Nigeria. I thought it was smart to give a brief, what I could call education to maybe some of our viewers who are students or young, who really don't know how electricity works. Electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. So this slide basically, gives us an overview of the whole idea of electricity, how it is generated, transmitted, and distributed. So power plant generates the electricity, either from the dams or from the thermal stations or even solar panels and all of that. And then it goes through the transformers, that steps up the voltage for transmission. So you have the transmission lines, those massive ones you see on the roads or on the highways. And then when it gets to our neighborhoods, there's a transformer also that steps it down and then finally being distributed to our various homes. So this is basically how electricity works, the entire process of how it is generated, transmitted, and then distributed to consumers, whether homes or industries. Let me give a brief history on of electricity in Nigeria. So the generation of electricity began in Nigeria in 1896 when the first power plant was built in Lagos. However, it was not until 1929 when the Nigeria Electricity Supply Company, NESCO, was established as an electric utility company. The colonial government enacted the Electricity Corporation of Nigeria Statute of 1950, commonly known as ECN, in order to effectively coordinate the electricity development across Nigeria. Post-independence, the military regime promulgated Decree number 24 of 1st April 1972, and the Electricity Corporation of Nigeria and the Niger Dam Authority were merged to form the National Electric Power Authority. Almost every Nigerian who is maybe 10 years old should know NEPA, the notorious utility company called NEPA. So as population grew exponentially and successive governments failed to effectively plan and invest in the power sector, initial teething challenges soon became commonplace and demands for power outstripped supply capacity. Also, key generation infrastructure began to deteriorate and collapse. Now, reforms began in the power sector. With the return to civilian rule in the year 2000, the President Olusegun Obasanjo administration embarked on a far-reaching reforms of the power sector by constituting a 9-man technical committee known as the Electric Power Implementation Committee, EPIC.